Hiya. Yeah, good, how are you? Okay, no worries. Well, I'm just filming this vlog, so... you're joking me. It was literally thrown at that. I was filming outside, I got absolutely drenched. I'm just looking out the window now and it's like blue skies. Victoria's mentioned in a couple of places online recently that we tried to spend no more than £40,000 per bedroom in one of our HMO projects. And whilst this is completely true and a figure that we rely on a lot, it seems to have confused a few people. So what I wanted to do today was to talk you through our logic behind that, not because you're necessarily going to go out and buy HMOs for 40 grand a room, but to help you figure out exactly what you should be spending per bedroom. Now, I don't really know how I'm going to cover this because I know what it means to me, and I'm not exactly sure how I can explain that or convey it in the best way. But actually, as I sit here and think about it, I don't think me sitting in front of a laptop is going to be the best way to convey it, because we don't use this figure when we're sitting in front of a laptop. We use it very early on in the project before we even get to looking at things like deal analysis, spreadsheets, return on investment, cash left in. It is pretty much the first number that we use when we're assessing a deal to understand if it's viable and worth moving on to the next stage of our due diligence process. So rather than sit here, let's do what we do in real life. Let's go and have a look around one of our projects. I picked the wrong time to go outside. Anyway, so we're on site and let's get back to this 40k. So we are looking for a figure that can give us a very quick overview of whether or not a property is viable. And the first thing that we do whenever we're reviewing a project is have a look around and figure out how many bedrooms can we get in this place. So this is bedroom 1, and then as we walk around the rest of this site, bedroom 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and finally number 8. So an easy 8 bedrooms on this site, and with us knowing that we can spend up to £40,000 per bedroom and it still makes sense, that gives us a budget of 8 times 4, £360,000 to spend on this project. Now, we knew we could buy it for about 210,000, which gives us £150,000 left to spend on the renovations. If you're not comfortable or familiar with pricing up renovations, you could always get a couple of builders around to give you an estimate, but we knew just from looking around here that 150,000 would blast this place. We could get it done for that pretty easily, meaning that our cost per bedroom is going to be sub £40,000, and straight away we know that this one is worth moving on to the next stage of due diligence. The one question we get asked a lot is, what does that £40,000 actually include? Is it just what we spend on the physical bedrooms? In our case, we spend that on absolutely everything. So the 40 grand covers all the communal space, which gets asked a lot. In this case, we're doing a cellar conversion. We've got all the en-suites going on in here. Obviously, the lounge, kitchen, external works on the yard, and we've got new windows and everything. So it's not just a case of we spend 40 grand renovating the bedrooms with furniture and everything. That is our finished cost for the product. That's only part of the story though. Obviously, what we are willing to spend on a room is not necessarily going to be the same as what you're going to be willing to spend on a room. And in order to decide what you want to spend on a room, you need to know a couple of other things. One of them is how much the property is going to be worth when it's done up, and obviously that depends on whether you're going to get a commercial or a residential valuation on it. So let's scoot across to a couple more projects and I'll talk you through that. So this is Churchgate, our big 9-bedroom commercial to residential HMO conversion, and valuing something like this, in my opinion, is actually pretty straightforward. There's 3 things you need to keep in mind. One is the total rental income. The second is the area multiplier that your lender will apply, and that varies from 8 to 12 times the annual rent depending on how affluent and how confident the lenders are in that particular area. Stockport here we get about 10 times. Places like Blackpool, and I always pick on Blackpool, it's just the obvious choice I know, but other places get 8 times, and places like London will get a 12 times multiplier. And then you've got to factor in whatever they will deduct for your running costs, and this is usually somewhere between 25 and 35%. So in this case, we get 10 times multiplier and we get a 25% deduction for running costs, which takes us to a valuation on this of about £450,000. That's nice and easy, but what about if you're working on smaller projects, residential to small HMO conversions, where you're only going to get a bricks and mortar valuation? Well, it's funny you should ask that, because this little house behind me over here is exactly that. It was a residential property, still is residential obviously. It's a 4-bedroom HMO, and unlike the commercial projects where it's a pretty simple mathematical equation to figure out what it's going to get valued at, with this one it really just came down to good old-fashioned research and due diligence. And by looking around the local market area, seeing what previous sold prices were for similar size houses, similar conditions, we figured out this one would be worth around about £160,000 once done. So for a 4-bedroom, divide that by 4, 40 grand per room. Again, it was a bit of a no-brainer. Okay, now that we got all of the sort of key pieces of information, we can start piecing this together to actually get to what your number per room should be. And whilst I'm not convinced that I've done the best job of explaining this so far, hopefully, once we plug it all into a spreadsheet, it'll start to make a bit more sense. You can figure out your own target cost per room based on your gross yield, your net yield, or your return on investment. Now, frankly, I find gross yield a bit of a redundant number, particularly with regards to HMOs, because running costs can vary pretty massively across the board. But if that's how you like to think, then we have got an answer for you, don't worry about it. So starting off with the gross yield, on the the left-hand side, you've got your monthly rental income right here, and you have got your target gross yield across the top. And obviously this doesn't factor into things, your running costs or anything like that. It is purely based on your rental income. Gross yield is your gross rent, so don't need to worry about how much your utility bills are or anything like that. And you can see very quickly at a glance what you can afford to spend per room based on the monthly rental income in your area and your target gross yield. And typically, if we were to look at gross rent, we're operating somewhere around about this sort of bracket, from £500 to £550 a month, and target yield of, I guess, by default, 15%, because we're spending about £40,000 per room. So that works out quite nicely. Net yield, a little bit more relevant because it factors in all of your running costs. Again, we've got the matrix here. The other thing that you need to input here, though, are what those running costs calculate out to be. Now, in our case, we tend to see roughly 50% of our rental income goes towards our running costs. This includes your mortgage, all your utility bills, cleaners, Virgin, Netflix, whatever else you include in there, and maintenance and voids. Figure out what you expect that to be. Some people will say that your running costs will maybe be closer to 40% rather than 50%, but if you're erring on the side of caution or you don't know, then 50% works out pretty well for us. So assumed net profit percent. So actually what you need to keep in mind here is that you're putting in your net profit percent. 50% is easy because the other half is 50, but if you say we're a 60-40 split, you're putting in your net profit percent here. So your net profit would be 60 if your running costs are 40. Don't get it the wrong way around, otherwise your figures will be wrong. So if you think your running costs are going to be 30%, your net profit percent would be 70. Understand? Cool. So again, say we're operating in this 500 to 550 mark, and round about 40-ish thousand pounds per room, we're up 9 or 10% net yield. So you can work it backwards from that. If you wanted an 8% yield and the rent in your area was 450, you should be spending no more than £47,250 per room. Finally, the ROI calculator. Now this is what I focus on. Pretty much every calculation that I use for our HMOs is based on return on investment after refinance. And that is why we need to go back to understand what our end value is going to be, because that is going to help us determine how much cash is going to be left in the deal. If you're only looking at your net and your gross yields, that's less important. But if you want to take it to this level where we are so confident on our £40,000 that we can walk into a house and say, yeah, this is going to work, then I'd advise looking at your return on investment. Now, everything highlighted yellow here needs an input, so you can see that there's a few more fields in here, but again, it's pretty simple. So you put in your room rent, let's say that's $550. Let's say your running costs, let's keep them at 50%. It's what we work to, and I think it's a good number to work with. Your total spend. Now, you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can put your total spend in here, and then it will spit out the answer at the bottom in terms of what your ROI it can be. Or you can leave this blank for now, or put in a sort of arbitrary number that you think it's going to be round about. Let's say it's going to be £50,000 just now, and then come back and tweak it later to make this ROI down at the bottom exactly what you want it to be. You also need to put in what your mortgage is going to be at the end. Now, this could be anything from 85% with Kent Reliance down to 60, 50% if you want to be fairly lowly leveraged. But I'll stick with 75%. And then this is what I was talking about down at Churchgate about your area multiplier and your running cost percent. So area multiplier for Stockport is 10 times. Let's say that it's 9 times. Let's say we're in a slightly less affluent area, if I can dare to say that. Stockport's not the most affluent place in the world, but from a lender's perspective, a bit less desirable. And running costs, 25%, could be 30, could be 35, whatever you want it to be. Make sure you put it in the right field here. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. And you'll see that based on this, your commercial return on investment is 15.68%. And like I say then, okay, let's say you had a target of 20% return on investment. You can just tweak this number. So let's move it from 50 down to 45, 20.57%. Let's go 45,500, 19.95, 45,400, 20.07. You get the idea. You can amend this number until you get the ROI that you're looking for. If you wanted a 30% return on investment, obviously you'd have to bring your total spend per room down, 40 grand roughly. Or if you're buying simpler HMOs that are just going to get a bricks and mortar valuation, which in my experience is going to be most of the time, unless you're doing these big projects with 7+ bedrooms and it was a commercial building to start with, blah, blah, blah. Base it on the bricks and mortar valuation, you won't be disappointed. So you can forget about the area multiplier and the running cost percent in that case. What you need to do is figure out what your end residential value per bedroom is going to be. Now this sounds maybe a bit complicated, but realistically it's just a case of doing your due diligence, looking on Rightmove like I mentioned down at Hazel Grove, figure out exactly what the house you think is going to be worth at the end. Let's say it's a 5-bed and you think it's going to be worth £200,000 at the end. Well, your end residential value would be £40,000. Mortgage, again, you can update this and it will tell you what your residential return on investment is going to be. Clear as mud, right? It's maybe not the easiest process to get your head around, and I know 100% that is down more to the fact that how I've explained it than the fact it's actually complicated, because really it's a simple process, but well worth spending a little bit of time to get your number, ideally based on your return on investment, because it will just help you make decisions so much quicker and stop wasting a lot of time when you're viewing properties. I'll stick this spreadsheet in a link below the video, so if you want to download it and have a play around with it, please feel free. It won't cost you anything except your email address, but hopefully it will help you out massively, and give me a shout if you've got any questions.